Dear friends, today I will share a story about a talking parrot and a woman who transformed into a gecko. Before we start the video, I request you to please like this video, subscribe now and click the bell icon next to it. Let's begin the video now. Friends, in a small village in Iran, there lived a handsome young man whose beauty was so remarkable that it became the talk of the town. He was an orphan raised by the village imam, earning his own living and residing in his own house. He owned a beautiful parrot, which he taught to recite Quranic verses and practice rituals, and the parrot could speak a few words. The young man always told his parrot, "You should speak the truth and never lie." Although he lived in a Muslim neighborhood, there was a brothel nearby, and a beautiful woman resided there. One day, the madam of the brothel said to the woman, "There's an extremely handsome young man in this area who always travels between his home and the mosque. He never looks around and doesn't even know that there is a brothel in this neighborhood, nor does he know about your beauty." The prostitute responded, "How is that possible? Even prominent gentlemen fall for my beauty and come to my door." The madam suggested, "If you want proof, you could try to test him." "All right, I will test him," the prostitute agreed. The woman disguised herself as a virtuous lady and stood in front of the mosque, hoping to catch the young man's attention under the pretext of seeking help. The young man arrived, but walked past her without a glance, not even raising his head to look her way. This scenario continued for 3 days, with the woman standing in front of the mosque, but the young man never looked up at her. One day, the woman pretended to be very sick in front of the mosque and collapsed on the ground as soon as she saw the young man appearing to be in dire condition. Moved by humanity, the young man asked others nearby, "Who is she? Does anyone know her?" Everyone shook their heads, indicating they did not recognize her. Everyone thought she must be some poor woman. Hearing this, the young man said, "Then please take her to my house." The woman was pleased, thinking, "What I wanted is happening. At least I'm going to his house." She thought it wouldn't be difficult to seduce him at night. When the young man went to the mosque for prayers, the prostitute waited for him at night, thinking she would cast her spell on him. When he returned home after the prayers, the prostitute sat up and asked him how he was feeling. She tried to seduce him with her gestures, which were quite inappropriate. However, the young man did not show any interest or even glance at her. Frustrated, the prostitute thought, "What kind of man is this who doesn't respond to my signals? Even an old man would have succumbed by now." The young man then asked her, "Do you not have parents?" To which she replied, "I am an orphan in this world." She began to weep loudly, but the young man still said, "Look, it is not proper for you to stay in my house like this." The prostitute then said, "If you drive me out, where will I go now? Thank you so much for giving me a place in your home when I was ill, but now I am wondering where I will go from here." Disturbed by her words, the young man said, "All right, you can stay here tonight, but you must leave in the morning." That night, the woman hatched thousands of schemes to lead the young man into sin, but none succeeded. In the morning, the young man went to his familiar cleric and said, "A non-mahram woman is in my house. I cannot keep her there. What should I do?" The cleric responded, "If the girl is an orphan, has no family and is unmarried, then marry her. That way you will become mahram to her, and she will have a place to live. This will not be sinful for you." The young man had to marry, so he went home and told the prostitute, "The cleric advised me to marry you." Hearing this, the woman was taken aback. She thought to herself, "I came here for my own desires, yet now I am supposed to marry him and live as his wife?" The woman told the young man, "Give me one night to think it over. I will let you know in the morning." She then thought about what to do. Suddenly, an evil thought crossed her mind. She thought, "Even if it's just for a few days, I have him in my grasp. I can stay with him for a couple of days and then find an opportunity to run away." The next morning, she told the young man, "I am ready to marry you." The young man was pleased and thanked Allah, thinking that he had not committed any sin and was entering into a lawful relationship, also arranging a home for a woman. He called the cleric and completed the marriage formalities. Everyone in the area was happy, thinking the young man had married and chosen a helpless woman as his life partner. They were pleased with his nobility. The young man was a righteous servant of Allah, so Allah protected him from sinful acts. But the woman was a prostitute from a brothel, used to spending nights with different men. How could she spend her life with such a righteous man? Initially, she was satisfied with the physical relationship, but then she decided to leave. She struggled with how to leave now that she was his wife. She secretly sent a letter to the madam of the brothel to rescue her. The madam came to her house and asked, "How could you marry him?" The woman replied, "I was so enchanted by his beauty that I went mad thinking about how to spend a night with him. But he never looked at me. So he proposed to marry me based on the cleric's advice, and I agreed. But now I don't like it here anymore. I want to leave." The madam said, "Then get a divorce from him." The woman replied, "No, he is a good man. He won't divorce me. It would bring shame upon him in the community. I find it unbearable to be with such a virtuous man. I never liked such decent people. I remember the times when I enjoyed the pleasures of many men at night. Wealthy men showered me with money. I'm not getting anything like that here. You better bring me some poison so I can kill him." Hearing this, the madam went out to arrange for poison, which she brought back and handed to the prostitute. That night, when the young man came home, his wife served him food, secretly pleased that she would be able to kill him that night. But the young man had married her only out of fear of Allah, to avoid committing any sin. He was not particularly interested in her beauty. He was steadfast in his faith. As these thoughts filled her mind, she began to poison his food. At that moment, the young man's pet parrot, which had been sitting there and witnessing this heinous act, became restless and started shouting, "Master, save yourself! Master, save yourself!" The young man approached the parrot and asked, "What's wrong with you? Why are you screaming like this today?" But the parrot could not say more than that. It just repeated the same words. Unaware, the young man ate his dinner and told his wife, "I am going to sleep now. I need to wake up later for the tahajjud prayer." After the young man left, the prostitute thought to herself that within a few moments the man would start screaming in pain. A while later, the young man called out to his wife, "Wife, come here. I feel unbearable pain in my stomach, as if someone is stabbing me." She replied, "You must have eaten something wrong." But the young man said, "No, I can tell my time has come. Please call the cleric." But the woman did not call the cleric. She watched her husband writhing in pain until he died, reciting the Shahada before his death. Meanwhile, the parrot kept shouting helplessly, "Master, I'm telling the truth. Save yourself. Master, I'm telling the truth. Save yourself." The woman told the parrot, "Shut up. You talk too much." After the young man's death, the woman called the madam of the brothel to come quickly so she could bury him. She was very pleased, thinking she had finally rid herself of her husband. She then returned to her life in the brothel, immersing herself in a world of sin. Allah had given her a chance for a beautiful life. She could have repented for her sins and lived happily in her husband's household, preparing herself for the hereafter, but she did not do so. She immersed herself in her worldly life once again, ruining her world and the hereafter by her own hands. She even poisoned her husband to death. Meanwhile, the parrot mourned its master's death. The next morning, when the cleric did not see the young man at the mosque, he became slightly worried. He sent a few people to check on him at his house, but when no one answered the door, they assumed the couple was still sleeping. This was unusual, as the young man never missed a prayer, no matter the circumstances. They waited for a while and then left. During the duha prayer, the cleric sent a boy to see where the young man was. Again, no one answered the door. This situation continued until the evening. Finally, the cleric decided that something terrible must have happened, as it was completely out of character for the young man to miss prayers. He returned that evening and knocked on the door again. Still, there was no response, but he could hear the parrot inside shouting, "Master, save yourself! Master, save yourself!" Realizing that there was trouble, the cleric gathered some villagers and forced their way into the house. Inside, they found the place empty and shrouded in darkness, with no one but the parrot there. The bird continued to shout its warnings, but there was no further clue as to what had happened. Thinking that perhaps the newlywed couple had gone out or traveled somewhere, the cleric and the villagers left. However, the situation felt increasingly wrong to the cleric. That night, as he woke for the tahajjud prayer, he felt a deep unease. He prayed for insight into the young man's situation. The next night, the cleric had a vivid dream in which he saw the young man dressed in blood-stained clothes, his face tear-streaked. Disturbed by the dream, the cleric sought its meaning through Islamic texts and consultation with other scholars. No clear understanding came, but the recurring nightmare persisted, each time urging him to look behind the young man's house. Compelled by his troubling dreams, the cleric went with some associates to dig behind the house. There, to their horror, they uncovered the young man's body. He had been buried hastily and without proper rites, his body still remarkably preserved and emanating a faint glow of sanctity. The village was shocked and grieved as they realized the full extent of the tragedy. They promptly arranged for the young man to be given a proper funeral according to Islamic rites, and the community mourned the cruel fate that had befallen a righteous and beloved individual. As for the parrot, it was found dead beside its cage, having succumbed to the stress and heartbreak of its owner's murder. The cleric, moved by the loyalty and truthfulness of the parrot, buried it near his master, marking the grave with a small stone. The tragic story of the young man and his deceitful wife spread throughout the village, serving as a somber reminder of the consequences of sin and the protective power of faith. So, friends, you see how the divine justice unfolded. Let us all strive to fill our deeds with kindness and truth, and never harm another soul. May Allah grant us the wisdom to lead righteous lives. That's all for today's video. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Stay well and take care. Allah Hafez.